Welcome to Disruptors Unleashed, a new podcast series by Dassault Systèmes that showcases the disruptive technologies shaping our future and the trailblazers redefining our industries. Every episode will seek to challenge your understanding of what's possible, because on Disruptors Unleashed, we don't just adapt to change, we ignite it. And in our first episode, we take a look at unconventional ways to innovate in the ever-evolving world of manufacturing. With our guests, Stéphane Siroux, David Rowan, Florence Verzelin, and Paul Armstrong.
It's possible that no other era in living memory has experienced such radical, rapid, and widespread technological change as the one in which we are now living. It's a period of profound digital transformation, and it should come as no surprise that manufacturers are also finding the way they operate transformed by new technology. The possibilities can seem limitless. New materials, new processes, new products, even entirely new business models. We talk to leading industry experts to try and understand the nature of these technological changes and the skills and attitudes manufacturing industries will need to cultivate if they are to turn new ideas into real innovation. To start with, however, we must understand exactly what technologies are on the table and what trends are shaping their deployment. For this, we turn to Stéphane Siroux. Stéphane is Vice President of High-Tech Industry at Dassault Systèmes and gives a taste of some of the new technological tools manufacturers are working with.
There are so many new changes happening in the economy today. New materials is a fantastic new scope. One of the items we're working on, for example, at Dassault Systèmes is how do you design a battery? In particular, with the advent of electric vehicles, how do you design, the batteries which will power these today and tomorrow? And there's a lot of change here as we move from lithium-ion typically to solid state in a few years. And that's just one example of how, new materials, new research will really be able to build this kind of new society that we're building with, in particular, electrification here. So we're looking at that, obviously. The semiconductor space is changing very quickly. As we come to, the limits of Moore's law, we start looking into what's called more and more than more. And here, when you build more advanced packaging, for example, the 3D stacking of wafers, that's yet another example of where, new technologies, new modeling capabilities, new simulation capabilities will come into play. And you're seeing these kind of momentous shifts throughout industries.
David Rowan is an investor, founding editor-in-chief at Wired UK, and the author of the book Non-Bullshit Innovation, so knows a thing or two about technological change. He too is effusive about the options available to manufacturing industries today.
We know that machine learning and artificial intelligence is becoming commodified. We know that there's pressure to create more sustainable materials. We know that there's new ways to interact, metaverses and, virtual twins. What it needs is, first of all, creative thinking from hybrid teams on what can become a business. Secondly, new business models to make these businesses viable. And thirdly, behavior change, adoption by enterprise, but also by consumer customers. And I think in the next decade, we're going to see a transformation in manufacturing.
But how do we really get inside the nature of the opportunities this new technology brings? Well, a great starting point is to look at sustainability. The climate crisis arguably remains the defining challenge of our age, and one that continues to provoke countless responses from individuals and businesses. In November 2022, US President Joe Biden identified it as such, vowing, "I will not take no for an answer. I will do everything in my power to clean our air and water, protect our people's health, to win the clean energy future." This announcement went hand in hand with the landmark Inflation Reduction Act, which made nearly $400 billion available for climate action. For years, the science on climate change has been clear, but now the will and the resources needed to turn ideas into actions is beginning to materialize. Florence Verzelin is Executive Vice President of Industry Marketing and Sustainability at Dassault Systèmes. She argues that now is the moment for manufacturers to seize on this breakthrough and implement technologically driven sustainability transformation.
First, I think sustainability has been finally understood as a very important issue. We've been talking about sustainability since I'm a child. But then, during the last 2 years in particular, we've seen that people really came to realize that we are in the decade to deliver, that unfortunate, catastrophic climate events are becoming more and more common. So if we don't transform the way we manufacture, we use our assets, we are bringing the planet to disaster, and we are not going to let anything left to your child when he's going to be a grown-up. And I think people finally realized it, and they understood that they had to transform. And then they understood that the transformation will not be so easy. If you want to go from a product with a lot of carbon to a net zero product, from a carbonated company to a net zero company, well, it takes a lot of investment and technology to make it happen, to make it possible. And then I think we're seeing a new generation who wants to change the game. And I'm very confident on our children and the way they want to change the world, to go from product to experience, from a carbon society to a net zero society, and basically to innovate differently. And last but not least, the technology is finally ready.
But what technology exactly? For David, the sky is the limit, and the opportunities for innovative companies to make major change is growing day by day. He sees sustainability not as a challenge, but as a galvanizing force in shaping the future of manufacturing.
The killer app at the moment is the urgency of the climate transformation. And I think any organization that wants to move quickly just needs to tell the story that what we're doing is going to take toxic materials out of the system, going to minimize energy usage. Because I'm seeing so much amazing work in synthetic biology, in precision fermentation when it comes to making food, in using, biomaterials, algae to replace leather and remove a lot of the toxic manufacturing process. The creativity is there. The science is advancing super quickly. The motivated teams want to come and kill the old way of doing things. The money is there. The capital is there. I think it's creating both that sense of urgency in the way we deploy resources, but also those hybrid teams that collectively know how to adapt these new methods to the old customer needs.
However, if manufacturing industries are to make the most of technology and transform their businesses to deliver a more sustainable future, then they need to have the skills and workforce to do it. And here we run into a problem. In a 2021 survey from McKinsey, it was found that 87% of businesses were currently facing skills shortages, or expected to do so within the next 5 years. Stefan elaborates on the challenge.
Future of work is the cornerstone of the discussion here. Because if we say effectively, and if we assume that manufacturing is going through a momentous shift, the next question is obviously, well, what is the workforce that we need to be able to drive this? Now, many people might say, yes, there's automation coming through, the workforce will increasingly be automated. But what we're really seeing here is that in the end, having a skilled, trained workforce is really what's going to make the difference. Now, the question is, what should we train that workforce in? And that brings us back effectively to the trend that we've seen over the past couple decades, which is that manufacturing has a little bit been left behind when it comes to talent attractiveness. Digital has been on the rise, really attracting a lot of talent here. So we've really built this new digital continent, and people really have been yearning to work there, for one. Then we've seen a lot of the talent in manufacturing decline as a lot of the manufacturing has shifted to Asia. But we're seeing a new renaissance in terms of effectively manufacturing in the West, and a lot of need in terms of new skills here. So there really is a need here for new skills on your manufacturing side.
The problem is, where do these skills come from? Older workers are retiring, and the younger generation is increasingly moving away from a sector they perceive as dirty and polluting and towards lucrative and glamorous careers in high tech, just at the moment their skills are most in need to facilitate a green transition. And even when workers are willing, there's a gap between the skills produced and the skills the market needs. For example, it may take a student engineer 5 years to acquire a particular set of skills, but in those same 5 years, the demand for those skills can be superseded by the demand for a different set. The economy never stays still, and traditional institutions can struggle to keep up. So what can be done? Well, instead of waiting on graduates to come to them, one solution is for businesses to step in and cultivate the talent they need themselves. David gives the example being set by corporates in Peru.
There is a fundamental gap, though, between the exponential speed of change in industry. You can't say, I'm not ready for quantum computing. You can't say, AI, hold off. We have our old ways of doing things. You have to move quickly to survive. And traditional institutions like the universities. And politics plays a role because there is a certain way of thinking in allocating resources to universities. So I'm fascinated by the opportunity for corporates where the resources and the demand sits to create its own education processes. For my book, looking at the ways successful incumbent organizations are transforming, I went to Peru and I went to see the biggest conglomerate in Peru called Intercorp, with about 80,000 people, about 4% of the GDP of Peru. They have banks and supermarkets, they have hotels and cinemas, and they couldn't find skilled workers to take the company to the next level. And also, Peru has been a bit of a troubled place and the education system had failed. The leader of this company decided if the state isn't producing education, we're going to have to do it ourselves inside the conglomerate. So they started a school system for profit, tiny bit of profit, but affordable enough for the emerging middle class. And then they did the same to create a technical university where they were teaching the skills the conglomerate needed. They were having their head of the telco part of the company, their head of the industrial manufacturing part of the company, devising the curriculum and making sure that the students were getting an education that was right for tomorrow, not for yesterday. So I wonder how we can create this incentive system within big industry, not simply to make products that keep the shareholders happy, but to invest in the next generation of talent to make sure in 10 years the shareholders will be happy.
However, on top of people, to move a needle on innovation, manufacturers also need a culture that encourages it, one that finds the right balance between short-term business priorities and long-term transformative change. It's a challenge that can roll for even the most successful companies, especially large manufacturers with firmly established processes and infrastructures. For Paul Armstrong, technology strategist, futurist, and founder at London-based advisory firm Hereforth, when it comes to encouraging innovation, companies should start by thinking differently, creating an environment where new ideas aren't curtailed by established ones.
I'm intrigued to see how these new technologies that are sort of emerging at the moment, very much feeling their way out, impact the world of business, because we are living with the potential that remote work's now more popular than ever. Lots of people have downgraded offices and that sort of stuff. So we've got a lot of societal factors and sort of individual factors now impacting business. And I was doing sort of thought experiments planning for this. And I just thought to myself, wouldn't it be interesting if one day we had a remote innovation arm, that it was completely decentralized. So their only job was completely removed from your business. They don't see anyone, they don't interact, but their job is just to come up, but they're remote. So you don't employ them full time, you just literally for that project. There's a lot of interesting opportunities when you come out, when you sort of remove yourself from what we used to think because of the technologies and what they're enabling to where we can go next. And that's, I think, a very exciting space.
It is also the kind of agility and creativity that David sees in truly innovative organizations.
I'll tell you a few things I learned traveling to 20 countries whilst researching really exciting innovation inside big corporates. First, the really good ones didn't have an innovation department. They didn't have a head of innovation. Innovation was everybody's responsibility, because if you were a salesperson, you had feedback from how the customer's needs were changing. So how do you allow people at every level of the company to feed in these new ideas? Secondly, they were bold enough to allocate resources to play, to exploration, with no pressure of generating short-term revenue. And that's partly a way of understanding how technology may potentially create new future-facing revenue streams, but with no pressure quarter by quarter to do that. And thirdly, I often notice that they'd have a small team of pirates inside the organization, empowered to do things differently, but for some reason they weren't shut down by the culture because they had permission from the people at the top. And I just find it's very, very challenging in a hierarchical organization to get people trying experiments because they're excited about how these new materials could be used to create new products, when the norm of the company is, no, we use these old materials.
At Dassault Systèmes, this philosophy of embracing experimentation has been put into practice. The company has set up a dedicated incubator which looks at developing and promoting startups that could be game changers in the years to come. Florence talks about how the company works to support and develop new and ambitious talent.
We have an incubator at Dassault Systèmes that's called the 3D Experience Lab. And in this incubator, we are working with startups, but we are also asking our teams, if they're willing to coach the startups. And the interest for us is that because our teams are coaching the startups, they are in contact with these new ideas, this new ambition, this new system of thinking, and they bring back into their job these new ideas. And it is extremely powerful. And of course, some of the startups we help are going to be big, some of them are not. But out of every startups we are coaching, we are going to get very interesting ideas. So that's a good way for us to learn from that system. And what was super important in this incubator, the 3D Experience Lab, is that we made sure it was not just French only. We have an Indian incubator, we have an American incubator, we're working on Asian incubators, because startups all over the world, depending on where they are, they have different ideas, they have different ways of thinking, and they're in contact with different ecosystems. So this connection is of incredible value to us.
David identifies another potential hurdle to effective innovation: demands of conservative shareholders and investors, whose short to medium-term goals could conflict with the necessities of long-term change.
The single biggest impediment to most successful organizations to thinking like this is shareholders, who expect quarter by quarter things to be a little better than they were last quarter. And of course, these startups don't have shareholders. They're struggling to raise their funding, and they need, metrics that show some progress in order to raise their seed or their Series A round. Inside an organization, you have to find a way to stop thinking about the short-term needs. And maybe it's having a small team inside the company that has resources to do that experimentation. Maybe it's decision-making control inside the organization. Often I've noticed that it's companies that still have a family member in the executive team, or that are still controlled by the founders, that can take these bold risks. But it does take courage, because essentially what you're saying to your staff, your stakeholders, your shareholders is, tomorrow we're not going to be making money the way we have been for the last X years, but trust me, I'm going to take you there. That's a really brave thing to say. But this is the moment where you can capture people's excitement, where talent is motivated to build something new in different ways. We've realized that the planet is burning because for the last century or two, we kind of got it wrong. This is our one chance. So let's not blow it.
Ultimately, managing these concerns is going to be difficult. Manufacturing industries are large, and by nature can be challenging to reorient it in the face of new pressures. Sometimes it can feel like turning a container ship in a canal. But the world around us demands change and action. Action on the climate and sustainability. Action on resilience and adaptability. Action on meeting our ever-evolving expectations. It is also a world positively fizzing with new ideas and technologies that will enable these actions. If manufacturing industries can create right internal conditions and attract the right talent at the right time, then they can take advantage of this historic tipping point, become leaner, cleaner, and more productive than ever before.
Disruptors Unleashed is produced by Dassault Systèmes. For more episodes, follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Deezer, or your nearest audio streaming platform. To learn more about Dassault Systèmes, visit us at 3ds.com.